I'm Lee Bailey from the Natural Resource Governance Institute, and I have with me today Laurel Green, who's an advisor at Rio Tinto. And we'll be talking about some key issues in mining and governance. My first question revolves around the current sort of story or narrative that's playing out around mandatory disclosure of payments to foreign governments. This has been getting quite a bit of attention lately, and it seems that the mining industry is in some ways leading other extractive subsectors in this field. For example, in Canada, we have the mining industry getting squarely behind a new framework to have mandatory disclosure of payments to foreign governments. What has Rio Tinto's role been in that process, and how do you sort of see mandatory payment or mandatory disclosure with respect to your own business model?
Well, we've been very active in the discussions around mandatory disclosure, as well as other forms of transparency, for example, EITI. For the last 4 years, we've published our taxes paid report, which details all of the taxes that we pay in all of the key countries where those payments exceed $1 million. So we've been on a bit of a journey, and at the start of that journey was an appreciation that a lot of people didn't really understand the contribution that mining was making. I think there was a concern that we were being seen as not contributing effectively. And so while it took a little bit of time, I think internally for companies like ours to appreciate and be willing to disclose the taxes we pay, we're now in quite a comfortable position around that, and we recognize people want to know that, and that we actually have a very good story to tell in terms of our contributions. So when it comes to mandatory disclosure, we've been actively participating. The UK looks like it's going to be launching its regulation based on the EU Accounting Directive very soon, and we've been participating in the consultations around that. They've been very useful because it's not just about implementing a very standard form. I think there's been constructive consultation to talk about the practicalities of how that works. And I think as long as you capture those practicalities and so the reporting is meaningful, we're very comfortable. And I think a lot of mining companies are in that position now as well. And what we really would like to see is consistency in legislation so that introduces administrative efficiencies. It means we're not having to report different things in different jurisdictions. That's very costly and not particularly useful. And it helps people being able to, compare the data across different jurisdictions. So that's what we'd like to see in the mandatory reporting space now is that there's consistency amongst different regions.
Okay, thanks. Also, as a sort of extractive company, you're obviously involved in some of the different multi-stakeholder groups and arrangements that are becoming more common in various producing countries. What does it mean for a company like Rio Tinto to be in one of those groups? What are the challenges when you engage with multiple stakeholders in a particular country, and what are some of the benefits that you gain from that process?
I think the biggest challenge is that you don't have control of a process, and that's quite challenging for companies like mining companies. We're full of engineers who like to detail something down to the last degree. And so going into a process where you really don't have any idea where the outcome's going to end up is very challenging. And you have to be fairly comfortable as a company to participate in those processes. I think that's why it helps if you do have a fairly good approach to transparency and a comfort with our operating ability and our track record, that we believe we can engage very openly and we haven't got things to hide from our operation. So that's the challenge, is that you have to be prepared to enter into the spirit of it and take it wherever it leads you. But if you're willing to do that, the benefits can be quite big. I guess the other challenge I should mention is that they often take longer, and that's a bit of a challenge in the mining industry because people often want development or decisions made quite quickly, and multi-stakeholder processes do take a lot longer. But on the upside, you end up typically with more robust outcomes, and that's important to us in the mining industry because we're there for the long term. We want outcomes and relationships that are going to last many decades. And it's an incredibly useful process because, again, it's about helping people to understand and what you're contributing and what you're doing and how the mining industry works. But it's seriously listening to your stakeholders. And that's really important, is that if you get an opportunity where the people who are going to be affected by your operation, who are going to benefit from it, who are going to take the taxes or work in your operation, or the local community that you're going to be a neighbour of for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, it's incredibly important to listen to what those people actually want to get out of it.
So just to be a little more granular, is there a sort of good example, do you think, of a really successful multi-stakeholder process in which Rio Tinto's been involved and in which strong relationships of the kind you're describing have come out of?
So we're a member of ICMM, which is the International Council of Mining and Metals. And for several years now, ICMM has been working on this process, mining partnerships for development. And the genesis of that was a recognition that often resource-intensive countries don't benefit appropriately from mining development. And through various studies that have been done, one of the keys that was found was that it's a lack of strength of institutions that is stopping countries from benefiting to the greatest extent possible. And so out of that came various things, but including this Mining Partnerships for Development toolkit, which is about getting the key stakeholders, so governments, academic institutions, civil society, companies, together and analysing real data. So the companies who are operating or planning to operate in that country provide the real data about what they're planning to do, how much money is likely to be spent, over what time period, what's going to be needed. They provide that to an independent person, so there's confidentiality around sensitive data. And then that group gets together and really discusses what is likely to happen in that country, the sort of money that's going to be brought in, the sort of demand that's going to be needed, and discuss, well, what does it mean that they collectively need to do to help prepare that country and improve the capacity of that country to deal with it, and so get the most out of that development. And that's been quite an enlightening process, I think, about the people who are going to be part of that really making decisions about what should be done in their country and how they want us to be part of that.
Great. Well, thanks very much for joining us, and we appreciate your time.
You're welcome.